They say some stories should never be told. That speaking certain names and whispering certain curses is enough to call them back from the void. I didn't believe that once. Not until I heard the echo myself. The sound lingers, sending shivers. It started in a place like no other, a village tucked far away from the noise of the world, where even time seemed to move more slowly. Surrounded by a forest so dense it felt alive, we lived by stories, tales of gods and monsters, curses and blessings. Most were harmless, just warnings for the foolish. But there was one tale, one that the elders whispered only after dark, their voices shaking. The sound of a crackling fire fills the background. Voices murmur in low tones. A deep voice begins reciting. The shifting calabash, they'd say. It's no ordinary god. It moves when you're not watching. It whispers when you're alone. And if you're unlucky enough to hear its laugh, it will follow you until it has what it wants. I should have left it at that. But something about that story, it clung to me. A part of me needed to know more. And so, one fateful day, I began to listen for the echo. The first time I heard it, I thought it was a child playing. It was faint at first, almost playful, a laugh carried by the wind. But when I asked around, no one else had heard it. That's when I made my first mistake. I followed it. Footsteps crunched through dry leaves. A faint laugh echoes again, growing louder with each step. It led me to the edge of the forest, to a clearing I'd never seen before. The air there was different, heavier. And then I saw it, a calabash, sitting in the center of the clearing, glowing faintly like the embers of a dying fire. The sound of a heartbeat begins, slow and soft, growing louder. I stepped closer, my curiosity stronger than my fear. It looked ordinary, a simple hollowed god. But when I reached out to touch it, it moved. Just a little, a small shift to the side. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. But then, it moved again. A sharp, snapping sound echoes. Birds scatter in the background. That's when I knew, this was no ordinary object. And yet, I couldn't leave it alone. I brought it back to the village, hiding it in my hut. At first, nothing happened. But that night, that was when the whispers began. A low murmur fills the background, growing louder. Shadows flicker against walls. The sound of breathing quickens. I woke to a sound like someone speaking just beyond my door. I lit a candle and stepped outside, but there was nothing there, only the forest, dark and silent. But as I turned to go back inside, I heard it. My name, whispered from the trees. The whisper grows louder, sending chills. I ran inside and bolted the door, but the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, overlapping, until I thought my head would split. Then, just as suddenly as they started, they stopped. And in the silence, I heard it, the laugh. Closer this time. A hollow laugh echoes, louder than before. I paused, their voice trembling slightly. By morning, I knew the curse had begun. The village wasn't the same after that night. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. People disappeared, their names forgotten as if they'd never existed. And the calabash, it seemed to grow stronger, hungrier. The elders finally decided we had to act. The sound of drums begins, rhythmic and urgent. Footsteps crunch through the underbrush. A group of us ventured into the forest to return the calabash to where it came from, or to destroy it, if we could. But the forest, it had changed. The trees seemed to shift as we walked, their branches reaching out like claws. The air grew thick, each breath harder than the last. A distant scream echoes through the trees. The group halts, whispering nervously. We weren't alone. Something was following us, something we couldn't see. And then, one by one, it began taking us. The sound of snapping branches and muffled cries fills the air. The heartbeat returns, faster now. I don't know what it was, but it moved like a shadow, faster than the eye could follow. By the time we reached the clearing, only a few of us were left. And there it was, waiting for us, the calabash. A low hum begins, growing louder as the narrator speaks. It pulsed with light, as if it was alive. And when I looked into it, I saw everything. Its origin. Its creator. Its purpose. It wasn't just cursed, it was a prison. But the prison had weakened. And now, it wanted out. We had one chance to contain it. A ritual older than the village itself, one that required sacrifice. I knew what I had to do. But as I stepped forward, the calabash began to laugh again. This time, it wasn't faint. It was deafening. The laugh grows louder, shaking the ground. Shadows swirl around the narrator. I reached out, my hands trembling, and lifted the calabash. Its light blinded me, its whispers tore through my mind. And then, everything went silent. They told me not to touch it. They warned me of the curse. But I didn't listen. And now, I've unleashed something far worse. The sound of the echoing laugh returns, louder than ever. I thought I could end it. I was wrong. Let's go back to how it all began. The story begins long before I ever heard the calabash laugh, before it became a curse, before it began its eternal shifting. It begins with a betrayal, a spirit's vengeance, and a promise that should never have been made. It was said that, once, our village was blessed. Crops flourished, rains fell just when we needed them, and sickness was but a whisper of a memory. All this, we owe to one guardian spirit, Aduni, the keeper of balance. Her shrine lay hidden deep within the forest, where only the priest, one chosen by Aduni herself, could tread. The sound of rustling leaves and distant whispers fills the background. But the day came when greed took root in a man's heart. Oliewo, a man of ambition, sought power beyond the blessings Aduni provided. They said he wanted the strength of the gods themselves, to rule not just our village, but all the lands beyond. To gain that power, he entered the forest alone, breaking sacred law, and made a pact with a being far darker than Aduni. A spirit of chaos, imprisoned by Aduni long ago. It promised Oliewo everything he desired, for a price. A deep, guttural voice whispers in the background, a life for power. Oliewo returned to the village, bearing a strange object, a calabash unlike any other. It glowed faintly, like moonlight trapped inside, and seemed to hum with power. At first, no one questioned it. The rains came early that season, the harvest doubled, and Oliewo declared himself the village's protector. The hum of the calabash grows louder, layered with faint, overlapping whispers. But the power came at a cost. Those who angered Oliewo began to disappear. Some said they fled into the forest, others whispered that they were consumed by the calabash. And always, in the dead of night, the sound of laughter echoed through the village, soft at first, then growing louder. The laugh echoes faintly, sending chills. One night, the village elders gathered. They confronted Oliewo at his hut, demanding he destroy the calabash and end whatever dark pact he had made. But Oliewo, he laughed. He laughed so loudly, so violently, that it seemed to split the air itself. The sound of a loud, distorted laugh reverberates. And then, he opened the calabash. A low, guttural roar erupts, followed by screams and the sound of rushing wind. What happened that night became legend. Some say the calabash consumed the elders, turning them into shadowy figures that served Oliewo. Others claim it unleashed the chaos spirit, which ravaged the village and corrupted everything it touched. But all stories agree on one thing: Aduni herself came that night. The sound of a storm builds, thunder cracks, wind howls, and a faint chant fills the air. The sky opened, and a figure of light stepped from the storm. Her voice was both a whisper and a roar, shaking the very ground beneath our feet. A soft but commanding voice speaks, "You have broken the balance, Oliowo. For this, you and your calabash shall bear the curse of eternity." Oliowo begged for forgiveness, but it was too late. Aduni raised her hands, and with a blinding flash, the calabash was sealed. It would hold the chaos spirit forever, but only if no mortal hand touched it again. The sound of chains clinking echoes as the calabash is bound by glowing tendrils of light. The hum stops, replaced by silence. Aduni vanished that night, and so did Oliowo. All that remained was the calabash, lying still in the ashes of his heart. For years, no one dared to go near it. The elders warned that it was cursed, and that whoever touched it would awaken the chaos spirit within. But, as generations passed, the warnings faded into whispers. Until one day, a child heard the laugh. The faint laugh returns, distorted and echoing. The sound grows louder, layered with the rustling of leaves. The calabash was found again, shifting and glowing faintly in the forest. They say it moved when no one was watching, as if it were alive. The child who found it vanished that night. And so began the curse of the shifting calabash. The heartbeat sound begins, slow and soft, growing louder. There was one way to end the curse, or so the elders said. A ritual of containment, requiring the calabash to be sealed in its original shrine. But no one who entered the forest to perform the ritual ever returned. The sound of footsteps crunching through the forest. Distant whispers grow louder, overlapping. I've often wondered, did Aduni's curse go deeper than we knew? Or was the calabash waiting? Waiting for someone foolish enough, desperate enough, to try and end its story. The sound of the calabash humming grows louder, overtaking all other sounds. I panicked because I can still hear the echo sometimes when the wind is just right. They say the calabash is still out there, waiting for the next hand to touch it. But what if it doesn't need to wait? What if it's already coming for us? The echoing laugh erupts one final time, shaking the ground. What if it's already too late? The curse begins again. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories and see you in the next one.